11 years ago, I answered a bunch of fun food and nutrition questions. Now I'm putting myself to the test. What's changed? Have I evolved my own way of eating over these last 11 years? Let's go find out. I'm Dr. Gemma Sampson. I'm a sports dietitian that specializes in performance nutrition for cyclists who want to lose weight, get leaner, get faster without sacrificing their performance on the bike. Over the years, I've worked in various different fields as a dietitian and worked with numerous riders, evolving and refining my nutrition approach and the way that I teach people to fuel around everyday nutrition, their training nutrition, and their performance nutrition for racing. I dug up an old Get to Know Me Q&A that I did 11 years ago when I was working as a company dietitian in celiac disease as well as inherited metabolic disorders. I'm going to react to my past answers to see if they still hold up to what I recommend and do today as a sports dietitian, or see if my thinking and my practice has completely evolved. Let's go check out those questions, shall we? If we ate in the lunchroom together, what would you see me eating? This is what I said. Most of the time during the week, I'll eat a salad. I know, such a dietitian. It usually contains a mixture of veg such as spinach, rocket, red cabbage, tomato, peppers, cucumber, celery with feta, cheddar cheese, a wrap, and sometimes a can of tuna, depending on how hungry I am. If it's not a salad, it's last night's dinner as leftovers, which is generally a rice or a pasta dish with vegetables. I'm not really a sandwich person. Oh man, it's so funny looking back on what I used to do and how that relates to what I see in practice with my clients, because little old me back in the past was probably thinking that a salad for lunch was like the most perfect nutritious sort of meal there was, but with just a wrap and maybe sometimes putting some tuna in there, it's really missing out on enough carbohydrate, probably for the amount of exercise or activity that I was doing at that point of time, because it's probably just before I started doing Ironman training at this point in time. I was probably starting to get into triathlon. Really not enough carbs in there to give me energy for the rest of the day and support the activities that I'd be doing, but also not enough protein. So that's probably an area that I'll see people doing in practice today. People are fixating on foods that they think are healthy, but perhaps not enough. They got all the veggies and the micronutrients down pat, but they're missing out on the macronutrients and the timing of nutrition around any sort of activity. So probably what I would have done to change what I was doing back then, I would have added a bit more carbs in there, something like quinoa or brown rice or couscous even, and definitely adding that protein source in, whether it was tuna or chicken or beans or fish or meat or whatever. Honestly, it's not a bad choice. It's just that I would be just adding a little bit more to it so that there's just a bit more substance and a little bit more energy just to keep me going throughout the entire day. Cyclists often focus a little bit too much on just the macros or keeping their energy content low, which is maybe what I was trying to do a little bit back in the past, to keep my energy low by adding all the veg, which is obviously really important. But without having the carbs and without having the timing around it, then it does have an impact on your performance, whether that's for cycling and for training, or if it's performance and being mentally, cognitively there when you show up at work. All right, second question. If I invited you around for dinner, what would I have cooked you 10 years ago? It would depend on your food preferences and whether you had any intolerances. Still do the same thing. I'm very conscious of people with intolerances because it's in my family and I've got friends that can't tolerate everything. In summer, it might be handmade burgers cooked on the barbie with lots of salad, pineapple, cheese, and beetroot, or in winter, it might be a red Thai curry or a chicken leek pie. Oh, I've not made that in a while. Maybe I should make that. A stir fry, a homemade Indian curry. I make a mean chocolate self-sauce and pudding, so chances are that'll be on the menu by dessert with ice cream. What's interesting, I don't cook quite as much now as I did back then, and maybe that's just because I've got more on my plate, a little bit less capacity, a little bit less time. I find that I'm now sometimes reaching for a little bit more convenience options, like a lot of the clients that I work with. I do love cooking for other people. I usually spend at least a month, a year at a training camp feeding and fueling pro cyclists. For me, taste and quality and lots of ingredients and lots of color, that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be a lot of vegetables increased in there. I'm not sure what I would cook you these days. I think it's probably going to be something a little bit more simple unless I've got a lot of time to prep or to prep plan. Years ago, I was doing this challenge trying to cook my way around the world, and I would decide what country we were going to. We'd maybe go to Jamaica. We went to Afghanistan. We went to Nepal. My friends would bring the drinks. I would plan out a menu, starter, a main, and a dessert that I would create from that country to learn about cultures and use different ingredients. I should probably start that back up again because it was really fun. It was a really good way to get you out of a rut when you're stuck and you're doing the same 5 or 6 different dishes that we so easily get caught up into when we're in our routine. I think there's not too much that I would change there. It's going to depend on the season, the time of the year, and what I really feel like. But it's a good reminder for me to get out of my routine and to try some different foods that I haven't cooked for a while. Gonna have to give that one a go. In relation to the cyclists that I work with, sometimes people can fixate on just like specific superfoods, or like it's got to be this perfect ingredient, and every food can be a superfood. Every food has got different nutrients in it that can be beneficial. If you notice you're in a rut, why not challenge yourself into trying a new vegetable or trying a new dish from a different country, like I was saying I used to do before, because it can be fun and you might discover something new, a new dish that you like eating. And there's always room for dessert. As far as I'm concerned, there is always space and there's always a place where we can have things like dessert, maybe not every day or every single meal, but there's a time and a place and enjoy these extra foods in our everyday life, even if you're an elite pro athlete. If I was stranded on an island, what food would I take with me? My answer for this probably hasn't changed all that much. My first thought here was cheese, Vegemite, rice crackers, and Vita Wheats, because I ration them. I still ration them. There's not many things that I miss from Australia when I'm living in Europe, but for some reason, like Vita Wheat crackers and Vegemite, love Vegemite. I have found a Vegemite stash and supply here on the island in Mallorca though, so that means I don't have to ration it quite so severely. Back then I've said, but I don't know how long I'd last on just those crackers, because I would weirdly start craving vegetables if I haven't eaten enough. And I do really like eating cheese. So I think it's really hard to pick one perfect food, because there is no perfect sort of food. But I think I would get bored eating the same thing every day. That's just not something that I'm capable of doing. And I think no one should get forced into eating the same different foods every day. That's why meal plans don't work, right? Because I see people getting these meal plans like chicken, rice, broccoli, carrots, same thing every single day. You get bored of it. Plus, it's missing different micronutrients and fiber and substance that we can be getting from so many different foods that are out there. I mean, try not get stuck on an island would be my advice from that. And one thing I do find interesting is that when I'm in different countries, I eat different things. When I'm in different houses, I eat different things. I was recently looking after some friends, their dogs, while they were on holidays skiing in Andorra, and I found myself eating completely different foods in their house compared to when I was in my own house. Don't know why that is. Have you found yourself doing that too? I'd be curious to hear if that's a common conundrum or if that's just me. What food do you struggle with to eat, even though you know it's healthy? Back then, I was saying getting enough serves of dairy in, or have milk with breakfast, and I usually eat cheese with lunch, eat my salad. But I often forget that third serving of dairy. I like yogurt, but I don't buy it regularly enough, meaning I don't eat it consistently. Thinking today about what foods that I don't eat enough, even though I know they're healthy, dairy still is one. Like I do still perhaps not have enough dairy every single day. I would always have at least 1 or 2 serves because I love milk. I love milk. I don't think I wouldn't last long without milk. I think milk is amazing. But I grew up in Africa and we used to get milk delivered to us pretty much fresh from the cow, to the point where like we had to boil it on the pot, and we'd have like an inch of cream on top of our milk that we'd have to like scoop up. And if we didn't heat it, we didn't cook it up, it would be pretty much solid and sour but the next day, which is disgusting. And so I grew up with like proper full cream dairy straight from the farm. So I love milk. But the food that I struggle eating personally still, and even probably back then, is fruit. Like I like fruit, but I don't think to eat it. It doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't come to me naturally to eat fruit as a snack. I think maybe because when I eat fruit as a snack, it doesn't last. Like I'll eat it and then I'm hungry 5 minutes later, which is where and how, when I'm talking with my clients, you want to pair that snack, that fruit, with some yogurt and maybe some nuts or some granola or muesli as a bit of crunch to make it a bit more substantial. Just the fruit on its own isn't going to give you a long-lasting energy or protein to feel full. So there's some nutrition advice I need to start following again for myself. Firstly, buying fruit and getting in the habit and routine of eating it on a regular basis, because I like it. I just don't remember to eat it. And I think when it comes to buying fruit and vegetables, is buy fruit and vegetables that you enjoy eating. So I really enjoy, like in summer, melons. So I'll often buy melons or I'll buy berries. But if you don't like apples, don't buy apples because you're not going to use them. or cook with them. So that's something I'll often do, is I'm more likely to cook with my fruit and eat it cooked versus eating it as a raw food. Don't force food down. There's no perfect food. If you don't like one fruit or vegetable, there's plenty others out there. There is hundreds of different fruits and vegetables out there to keep you occupied and keep you trying and exploring different things. And when you cook them, when you eat them raw, they're all going to taste differently as well. Next question. Have you ever had difficulty managing your weight? How did you gain control? So this is what I've answered back then 10 years ago. I've been really quite lucky in the sense that I haven't had too much trouble with my weight, as with physical activity, I've always been really active, was always balancing out my eating habits, which is an interesting side note. I find a lot of people, they use exercise as a weight loss control, which is all well and good while we were able to keep exercising at that higher level. But the second that exercise drops, our weight starts to creep up, which is what I observed. However, the most difficult time for me, I think, was when I first moved to the UK from Australia, which was in 2010, so 15 years ago. They talk about the Heathrow injection, which thankfully I didn't get, but the first 6 months of being in the UK, my weight did creep up from where I'd been stable for many years. It wasn't a huge weight gain, but it was greater than I was comfortable with. And I hadn't changed my eating habits at all. It was completely down to my activity levels dropping. I'm really cold intolerant, and I struggle to be active in winter when it's cold in my first year in England. But once I started commuting to uni and to work by bike, my weight returned back to normal as my energy levels went back up to what was comparable to living in Australia beforehand. So I think that's a really interesting example as to like my weight on the whole. I would say here in 2025, my weight has always been plus like relatively stable. I'm probably perhaps now maybe 2 or 3 kilos heavier than my lightest, leanest weight. But that leanness weight wasn't very, very sustainable. And I talk a lot about people with, if you're trying to get a weight, like you want a weight that you can maintain and be comfortable with, sort of walking around weight all year round. That's pretty much where I am at this point in time in my life. But there's been periods of time where my weight has been a little bit heavier, or it's gone up just a little bit. And perhaps when you're smaller, you're leaner, you're lighter, you notice that extra kilo or 2 kilos a little bit more. Other people usually don't notice it. We think other people are really observant to it, but most people don't notice it unless it's like 5 or 10 kilos, a big change up or down. But going back into the timing of what you're eating around the activity that you're doing is something that I see a lot with the clients, the cyclists, the riders that I work with. So many people are in this habit of using exercise as their only source of weight loss and their only source to lose control and to lose weight. And so if the exercise stops, their weight starts creeping up because they're in maybe like catchback calories, or I can eat whatever I want, it doesn't really matter, which is all well and good as long as you keep with that higher level of exercise. But I do encourage you to try get out of that mindset and start changing your thoughts and your way of fueling. We have a certain amount of food we need every day for everyday life. And then we need additional food on top of that for our training and exercise needs before, during, and after training. And what I see is that when people start fueling for that training, you add that extra food in before, you add that extra energy during the ride, you add that extra energy in your recovery afterwards, you're able to manipulate your food intake on a day-by-day basis. And for some of the clients that I'm working with, they might be needing to eat anywhere between 1,800 and 7,000 calories from one day to the next. But it's all around the training that they do. And when you fuel your training accordingly to the demands of that effort, when you stop training for whatever reason, whether it's you get sick, work goes really crazy, things are going on with your family, there's stress, you get injured, whatever it is, because there's going to be a point in time when our exercise and our energy levels do drop. When we get in this mindset and this relationship and this way of fueling our energy around the training that we do, your food intake just drops automatically without you having to even focus on it. And so many of my clients come back to me after going on holidays and they're like, I'm amazed. Like, how did I not gain weight? Like, I was eating pasta, I was eating this, and I was doing all these things that I never used to allow myself to do. But because their appetite is changed and they're able to eat intentionally, you're able to maintain your body weight so much more simply without having to focus on it and put so much effort into it. So start learning how to fuel your training. All right. So what is the funniest assumption somebody has made about me because I'm a dietitian? I bet this one hasn't changed. The usual response I got, because you often meet people over food, is something along the lines of, don't look at what I eat, assuming that because I'm a dietitian, I'll be counting every calorie and judge them on it. So trust me, I'm not. Definitely 100%. I mean, I usually joke around when people, whether I'm on the bike or it's at a dinner table, they're like, what do you do? Oh, I'm a sports dietitian. Like, oh, don't look what I'm eating. And I usually joke around and say, like, oh no, you have to pay me to judge you. Even then, but realistically, even then, even if you are paying me, you're one of my clients one-on-one, I'm not going to judge you about your food intake. It's actually a very unhelpful emotion or feeling to be judging ourselves around food, because when we judge and we shame, it tends to lead down these spirals of binge restrict, which are very unsustainable and don't last long and create so much drama and stress around food, which isn't necessary. Every food has its own place. There's some foods obviously are more nutritious and others are less nutritious. I'm not saying go and eat chocolate and ice cream and chips and lollies and stuff all day, every day, but there's a time and a place. I was on a 50th birthday on the weekend, which was amazing, and had a glass of champagne and there was some wine and there was some alcohol. Enjoy these moments, but again, let's recognize and be aware of what these extra foods have and how they contribute to your daily needs. A one-off situation of having some extra isn't going to break the bank. It's usually when we have multiple days and multiple weeks of surplus that we end up gaining weight. It's a lot easier for us to gain weight than it is to lose it. So if we can find a strategy and a plan around our lifestyle that we can maintain without having to put much effort into, it's a lot better for us in the long term. So yeah, if you want me to judge you on your food intake, then you're going to have to pay me for that, but probably not going to judge you anyway. What food do I think is underrated? My old advice was dried beans and lentils. They're so cheap to buy, really easy to use, and they increase the protein content and can be made to stretch out meals or make snacks like hummus. So yeah, that's a good point. It's a good reminder. I hadn't really thought about that. I haven't really used dried beans or lentils that much lately, probably because I haven't been cooking quite so much, or I've been using different meals, especially in the current climate where a lot of people have less budget or foods that can be a bit more expensive. The price of cost of living has gone up. Being strategic, being intentional with our food choices, dried beans and lentils can help stretch meals out. They add a bit of extra fiber, they add a bit of extra proteins. I do often add these into dishes. Maybe I'm making spaghetti bolognese and I'll pour half a tub of red lentils into that. But also I think in terms of current underrated, it's the boring basics of like eating your fruit and veg and getting the basic nutrition advice that most people are ignoring and pushing away as being too simple, like eating more vegetables. Like, I'm not even joking when I tell you that I've had one guy who he lost 6 kilograms in a month, because when we're looking at his food intake, he was so hungry with his training load that he was eating doubles if not triples of every meal. But there was no substance in those meals. I got him to add vegetables to all of those meals throughout the day, and he really severely, he was eating the same weight, the same volume of food, but probably cut out at least 1,000, if not 1,500 calories just by adding vegetables into that, and lost 6 kilos in a month very, very quickly, which was sustainable, and he kept it off after that. Similarly, one of my current clients that I've just finished up with this week, he lost 1 kilogram in the last 6 weeks or so, purely because we made one swap with the yogurt choice that he was using. Eating the same amount of food, but the nutrition profile of it changed, and as a result, he created a deficit by eating the same thing, but not. So I think when it comes to foods being underrated, it's the boring basics, it's the vegetables. They're the things that are severely underrated, but have a big impact if you use them wisely and strategically. So fueling isn't just about what you eat, it's about how, when, where, and fueling around that training, fueling for everyday nutrition, for performance. They all have their place. They're all really important. What is my favorite 0-calorie treat / distraction from cravings? This definitely hasn't changed. I said reading. If I start reading a book, I'm completely lost to the world and you will struggle to get my attention. True story, true fact. If I'm in a novel, don't even try. It's literally a waste of time. If I'm in a story, my world, my brain is in that story. The real world doesn't exist. And it's also why I can't read books at night, because I will stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning to finish that book. So I love reading, but I have to be very disciplined about it. I was given a Kindle for my birthday. I've gone back 10, 11 years ago. And that has reintroduced me my love of reading. At the time, I was reading Gone Girl. Right now, 100%, I read pretty much every day. I probably got back into a really solid reading every day habit, maybe 10, just around 10, 12 years ago. I think so much of us, we can get into these habits and these thoughts and beliefs. At the time, I was thinking that I don't have time to read, but then I was maybe Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the triangle of doom scrolling. And I recognized that. I got my phone out of my bedroom. I brought an alarm clock. Actually, I use a light clock. And now I've got the alarm clock, and I use my Garmin. I have the vibration on that as a backup alarm. So I don't have a noise alarm. I've got the light and the vibration to wake me up. And I read pretty much most mornings something. Like, there's some amazing books out there that I can recommend to you if that's something you'd be interested to learn more about. I've just finished reading a book now in 2025 called Unreasonable Success. Really interesting book about how sometimes, like, it's learning about listening to our intuition and following through on things that may not make sense, but those transformations can sometimes be the game changers for our life and our success. And I 100% can see some of those in my own life, in terms of deciding to leave Australia to go to England, leaving England to go to Spain, like quitting my job to go start my own business, to go back to uni. Like, there's so many big choices and decisions that I made in my life over the past 10 years or so that were unreasonable and shouldn't have worked from the outside perspective, but internally I knew they were the right decisions to make. And I think getting clear on that intuition is really, really powerful. Final question: what would be your top tip for eating? 10, 11 years ago, I said, don't deny yourself, because that makes you crave it and more likely to binge. Give yourself a break if you struggle with self-control. For example, take chocolate. If you can't stop after a couple of pieces of chocolate, buy small kid-sized pieces, the mini bars, like the fun size bars, instead of full blocks, and don't keep it in the house. If you have to make more of an effort to go and get it, then you're less likely to bother. I still agree with that philosophy in a lot of ways. There's no one perfect way to approach foods that you struggle with or you find a little bit more complex or difficult to surround yourself with. For some people, that strategy might be to eliminate foods from the house. Other people and other foods, it might be you can have them in the house, you can control them, you can regulate them. So I think if there's particular foods that you like having, but you know that they're easy to get out of control, then it's playing around to figure out what works for you. And there's no one perfect strategy. One thing I would often do in that scenario is go and eat that food in a social environment particularly with other people. I think with food, there is so much shame around certain foods. And a lot of times maybe there's dessert and you want that dessert, but you're thinking, no, I can't have that dessert. It's bad. I shouldn't be doing it. Again, like, getting clear on, is that actually true? A lot of times in that moment, if we deny ourselves eating that food, we're more prone and more likely to go and eat it in secret, which actually stirs up and creates more of that shame cycle around that food. Definitely still align with those strategies, but I think it's a bit of playing around to find which ones are optimal for you. And it's not a case of that cravings are bad. Actually, in contrast to that, I now use cravings as clues. Whereas I think in the past, I was perhaps more the traditional dietitian, like eliminate it, stop thinking about it, which, let's be honest, doesn't really work. I think now I start looking for clues and start looking backwards to see, like, okay, well, what happened early in the day or the day before or days before that perhaps it put you in that position where you're maybe craving those foods. Because they're things that I see day in, day out with my clients, that I see people that are craving sugar, they're addicted to sugar, they're like just eating all this food and they can't control themselves and they're beating themselves up about how bad they are and all this negative self-talk and chatter going on. Whereas I look at their food diet and I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense. Generally, they're massively underfueling. There's not enough food or substance in the meals, like that typical like salad for lunch after doing a 3-hour training session in the morning. They haven't had breakfast. There hasn't been no recovery nutrition. There are so many clues. And so they end up eating it later in the day. Or they've had 300 calorie snacks as breakfast and lunch. There's no food. There's no substance in there. Of course, you're going to go and snack and crave all these little foods later in the day. That's something I use a lot more now, rather than blame the craving. Like, those cravings sometimes come, sometimes go. There's lots of strategies we can use, particularly for cravings. Actually, maybe I'll do that as my next podcast about how to manage cravings, or some strategies you can use for cravings. But now I use them so much more as opportunities to explore what's happened and look at how the timing is out of balance. So yeah, it turns out that my younger self, my younger dietitian 10 years ago, had some pretty decent ideas and thoughts and beliefs and practices when it came to sports nutrition and nutrition. But experience, like all things, working with athletes of all calibers, backgrounds, has definitely redefined and refined my thinking and my practice and how I work one-on-one with people and teach people within field. I'd love to know if you've had some food thoughts and beliefs that have changed for you over the past 10 years, what you were thinking before and what you're thinking now. If you're a cyclist and you're looking to level up and optimize your fueling strategy, then make sure that you subscribe and follow so that you can get more up-to-date advice and recommendations about how to fuel for everyday nutrition, your training and performance. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I will see you next time.